Years at St Barbe. I'm going to talk about how St Barbe all began. Then Steve Marshall, Jackie Millard and Mariah Reagan will take us forward from there. And for the avoidance of doubt, whenever I refer to Lymington, please know it's my shorthand for the town of Lymington and Pennington. Also, inevitably, I'm referring to individuals who figured, but we must never ever lose sight of the fact that what has been achieved has been a fantastic team effort, including many unsung heroes and supporters. I'm limited to 30 minutes, so what we have is a quick canter over the events leading to the museum opening in 1999, and I'm grateful to Steve Marshall for finding the slides that we will see. I hesitate to refer to it as the first 25 years because that might be tempting fate. In 1969, Wellworthy's published a book recording their history so far, and they named it The First 25 Years. An inference there would be another the first 50 years. An inference there would be another 50 years. Within 10 years, the company had been taken over and disappeared altogether. That said, Elliott's in 1998 published a book, 125 Years of the House of Elliott, and are still going strong. Perhaps if called the first 125 years, they may no longer be with us. I joined the family last year in celebrating 150 years. The King family loom large in recording local history. And in the 1930s, Edward King strove to see a town museum. He hoped that the late Colonel Rooke's home, Woodside House, which was then owned by Lymington Corporation. But the war came, and although after that Edward King and Alderman Beagley remained keen, there was no appetite to pursue the idea because the priority was to build houses. In 1967, an exhibition mounted by the Lymington Historical Record Society and Lymington Community Centre demonstrated enthusiasm, but nothing arose from this. And we've got two pictures there. The one on the left is a report in the Evening Echo about the exhibition, and it tells us that a pair of Queen Victoria's stockings were on display. I'm quite worried about Queen Victoria and her underwear. She either was very careless with it or she gave a lot of it to favoured people, I don't know. The other picture is a lovely picture of Edward King on the right-hand side, and that is Janet Irvine with her two boys. And when I told Janet that we were going to show this picture, Janet, you explained to me that it was on the occasion of the late Queen's first visit to Lymington. So I looked that up, and that was in 1966, when the Queen came to look at the new town hall. In 1974, Edward King died, and his two daughters, Mary King and Janet Irvine, put energy into getting a museum. With support from the County Council, it was agreed that when an intended new library was built, a museum would be located upstairs. But the gestation period for a new library proved to be too long. We moved forward to the mid-1980s. A group of people became involved in fighting an application from a developer to build homes and a leisure centre in Buckland Rings, an application which went to a public inquiry and was rejected in 1988. Having achieved this success, the group then set up in the old toll house, next to what is now called the Monkey Brew House, an exhibition telling the story of Buckland Rings and Ampress Camp. And there's a nice picture there of noting what had happened. Most of the articles that we are going to show on the screen, just to headline things, were written by somebody called Brian Down, a reporter at the Lymington Times, and I'll come back to him later. The group had become an effective and friendly team, and some of them were next inspired by Robert Barrett to respond to his proposition, we must have a museum in Lymington. A first meeting was held at the Angel Hotel. So far as I can ascertain, the original members were, alphabetically, Robert Barrett, Joanna Close Brooks, Alan Codd, Janet Irvine, Jude James, the highly respected historian, Bill Klitz, Arthur Lloyd, another highly active local historian, Ted Marsh, and Clive Sutton. They adopted the name Friends of Lymington Museum, and Jude James was the chairman. But after 2 meetings, Jude James concluded that his professional commitments were such that someone else should lead the group, and the obvious person was Ted Marsh. Ted was the pivotal figure. There's a picture there of Ted. At this time, Ted was in his late 60s and retired, or on the point of retiring, from being a director of one or more companies in the Taylor Woodrow construction group. I do believe that the logo on his tie in that picture is the logo of Taylor Woodrow at the time. He was action man. He was a driver. He had the equivalent of an honours degree in talking straightforward common sense, and he did not suffer fools. Aside from business, he was a charming, generous and caring person. He often turned up to meetings on his motorbike, perhaps having come from his office in London, wearing a full set of the real thing motorcycle leathers. He was heavily involved in the Mary Rose project in Portsmouth, including regularly diving on the still submerged wreck. Within the group of friends, a team was set up to take the project forward. Alongside were Brian Down, the local reporter for the Lymington Times, who also was a keen historian, and Jean Vernon Jackson, daughter of Robert Hole and a councillor, notably adept at navigating the political administrations with which the group had to deal. Robert Hole, of course, was the driving force behind the community centre being set up. I'm not sure if Bob Coles was involved, the author of several books about our local history, including that wonderful book, Lymington High Street Then and Now, which St Barbe republished in 2002. Some tell me he was involved, others say not. A feasibility study was commissioned in 1990 and recommended that any museum should cover, in essence, the old borough of Lymington plus Boulder and Sway. A favoured location was a former council school in Cannon Street, and the county and district councils provided the funding for the study. Again, another article written by Brian Down. I noted in reading through it, for example, there's a note here, Chairman of the Accessions Committee, Dr. Joanna Close Brooks, has meticulously catalogued the 224 registered items which have been donated, some items being multiples, such as over 5,000 film negatives recording the history of Wellworthies. And it also records that one of the items was the 1830 horn-rimmed spectacles of Mrs. St Barbe, wife of the Lymington banker, Charles St Barbe. It was good fortune that key persons at this early stage were Stephen Locke, who was director of the Hampshire County Museum Service, and Martin Devine, recreation officer at New Forest District Council. I know from subsequent talks with Stephen Locke that he was seeing partnerships between the county and local groups as the only way that museums would be created in the future. And he kept the faith that the Lymington project would prove his point. The group meetings were attended by outside stakeholders. a county officer, usually a Chris Edwards, who later in 1997 was on the interview panel that recruited Steve Marshall, Martin Devine, the recreation officer at New Forest District Council, Richard Harrison, a museums consultant who had advised the group in setting up the Heritage Centre in the old toll house and was now retained to advise the new project. Hampshire Councillor Alan Rice attended, both in his role as chairman of the County Recreation Committee and for himself personally. He was an enthusiastic supporter and each year provided seed funding from out of his personal grants allowance. The prevailing majority at the Town Council had no interest in the project and so no representation, but there were friends and then trustees who happened to be town councillors. About 1991, an opportunity arose. The Church of England Primary School in New Street closed. The owners, the Diocese of Winchester, wanted to sell off the premises on the open market, but the District Council were able to negotiate a purchase coupled with the premises being earmarked for the museum's project. And again, a lovely article from Brian Down telling us that at this stage, the District Council were investing £220,000 in this project by buying the property and making it structurally sound. Coming back to Ted Marsh, I had been doing work for Ted Marsh and his family for a number of years. And early 1992, he rang me one day to tell me of the project and to ask me to join the team. I said I would think about it, and a few days later, I called him back and I said I hadn't got the time. Ted's response to my refusal was to say he would not accept that answer and said my partner Sandra and I must come for supper with him and his wife Miggy one evening to discuss. I probably immediately knew that I was doomed to give in. If one picked an argument with Ted, there had to be very convincing supporting material, of which I had little. And I gathered recently from Janet Irvine that Janet and Ted together had targeted me. Thank you, Janet. Having come on the scene, I found the group well on the way to establishing a charitable trust to own and run the museum. I found the District Council, having acquired the New Street School, had agreed to make it structurally sound and then lease it to the intended trust for 99 years at a peppercorn rent. And there is a picture of, a couple of pictures of what we bought. I'm not able to talk in architectural terms, but one of the things we were doing was we were putting the front of the building on New Street, whereas the school was designed with the front in School Lane. So we were wanting to completely reconfigure the way the whole building was being used. I found David Coates, a retired partner in the no longer with us Jackson & Jackson estate agents firm, was now enrolled for his surveyor input. And Gordon Young from King's Bookshop was already enlisted well in advance of his intended role to provide retail experience for the planned shop and then manage it. Gordon had become aware of the steering group because Alan Codd used to bring into King's shop the minutes of the group meetings, which Gordon photocopied for them free of charge. And here's a nice picture. This is actually later. This is Gordon manning the St. Barb's stall at the New Forest show. It's sometime after we opened, actually, because there's a poster there for whatever was the exhibition at the time. Later, Peter Ward, a friend and neighbour of Ted Marsh, joined to lead the fundraising campaign. But sadly, he died before the project was completed. Ted had assembled his team of workers. His often heard maxim was, "Give me the bricks and I will build it." And now he was set up to go. Alongside the business of this team, the Friends organisation was growing, and Ted had been replaced as chairman by Bill Klitz, Sadly, Bill Klitz had a bad fall one year putting up the Christmas lights in town and had to give up. And he was replaced by Frida Angelou and then by Gordon Young. From about 1988 onwards, the existence of the Friends Group and the aspiration for a museum was becoming more widely known, in part from Brian Down attending every meeting and being able to report regularly in the Lymington Times. This was leading to many items being offered and accepted for the intended museum, and they had to be stored. In Joanna Close Brooks' words, we stored stuff all over the place, with friends and other places we could scrounge room, but we kept having to move things, so it was hard physical work. A room at the old infirmary was used, and when this had to be vacated, 2 rooms at the master's house were used, and later the town council workshop at Woodside. The late Montague Dawson's daughter at Milford-on-Sea had 3 garages which were used until subsidence was found and everything had to be moved again. When funds permitted, a unit at Braxton Farm was leased. A scow rebuilt by Burton Apprentices was acquired and stored in the roof of a garage at Clive Sutton home at Buckland Manor. The gun punt, which you will remember featured in the first museum, was given by Doug Baverstock and stored in Clive's garden. Clive tells me the original ferry boat running from the quay to Ferryboat House on the other side of the river was also retrieved, but sadly it was too far gone to be saved. As we progressed, it became apparent it would help us develop credibility if we could have a high-profile person to be seen to be supporting us. And it was wonderful that Rafe Montague, now Lord Montague, agreed unhesitatingly to lend us his name and be patron. This is not Rafe Montague as you normally see him in pictures. This picture was actually taken when he opened the museum in 1999. On looking at the picture, on the right side to us is a little bit of Brian Down, and on the left side to us is a little bit of Bob Coles. The application to the Heritage Lottery Fund was successful, and they awarded us £261,000 if we matched this with raising £250,000 ourselves to cover installation costs. We took the lease from the District Council. We signed a contract for Peter Dunford's firm to carry out the main building works, and following a competition, we appointed a museum's designer. Again, Brian Down reporting, and there's a wonderful paragraph here that I must read to you from his article, if I can see it in this light. There's little doubt this latest revival on having a museum would never have materialised but for Ted Marsh, who often left his committee of volunteers in a state of trepidation with his forthright yet highly efficient manner. There's also a strange picture of me up there signing the contract. In 1994, we appointed our first curator, Harriet Purkis, and she was able to operate from a large room made available to us above Chance's shoe shop in the High Street, now Clark's shoe shop. To be seen now to be a presence, we organised the front of the building to be a front of house and shop leading to a temporary museum in a room, with the building works going on behind that. Harriet Purkis stuffed that room with as many items as possible, and Gordon Young and his volunteers now had a job to do. But we had to change our plans slightly because the District Council, fairly late on, told us they'd be wanting half our front of house for their tourist information centre. There's a picture there of, you've passed a picture of Harriet, and we're showing you there the front of house in those days. In 1995, Ted Marsh died. As you may imagine, the work involved was becoming increasingly demanding on everyone, and Ted, although not well, drove himself on. It's not putting too fine a point on it to say that in the event, Ted gave his life for the museum. And some years later, Gordon Young endowed an annual Ted Marsh Memorial Award. Picture there's a report there on Ted's death, and on the right-hand side, there is a picture of Sue Franklin, who I'll come on to in a minute, who stood in as a temporary curator. This is on an occasion when some representatives from the museum in Karnak came across, and there was an exchange of gifts, all based on the Quiberon expedition, which followed on from the French being here in 1793. The trustees appointed me chairman. 1996 was an unsettled year. We parted company with our curator, Harriet Purkis, and Joanna Close-Brooks took over as temporary curator. Living locally was Sue Franklin, a museum's curator, and she offered herself for the role with us, an offer which we gladly accepted. Sue worked with the designer in fixing the layout of the floor area, the displays to be themed, and the art gallery. But Sue was employed only 3 days a week, and in 1997 she concluded that with a young family, she could not give the full-time commitment needed, and so she put it to us that we needed to find somebody full-time. 1997 was the year that Steve Marshall joined us. There he is up there, with Gordon Young stood behind him. And his first task was to see the museum displays all finally installed. Towards the end of the year, we were able to open the art gallery. Our patron, Rafe Montague, formally opened the inaugural exhibition, Hampshire, A Sense of Place, curated by Pam Perry, and that is Pam in the right-hand picture. I think Pam probably looking at, that's probably the Yachting on the Solent exhibition, which you subsequently also curated. Pam later became a trustee in 2001 and is now the longest-serving trustee, following Joanna Close-Brooks having retired in 2019. About this time, we received the wonderful commitment that Janet Irvine entrusted to us all the King family historic material. And in discussion, we committed to finding a way to set up what we would call the King Research Centre. This took some years, and Janet was very patient with us. Janet, on behalf of the King family, has been an important benefactor, and Janet will be the last of 6 generations of the King family involved in Lymington life, starting in 1735, and along the way, including 3 mayors. There's a nice picture there of Janet with her husband, David. I don't know what the exhibition is, but I thought it was a nice picture to show. 7th of March, 1999. The complete museum was opened by our patron, Rafe Montague, after some last-minute drama. You may remember, as one entered the local history gallery, along the right-hand side, behind glass, was a timeline of exhibits. And this could not be installed until the day before the opening, because it could not be fitted until the Burton pilot boat had first been brought through. And that was later arriving than we had wished. And I know that Steve was working to complete the timeline exhibit until late the evening before we opened. The picture there On the left, there's a group of us on the opening day. I think that's Rafe Montague, Steve Marshall, Jean Vernon Jackson, David Coates, me at the back, Clive Sutton, and Sue Franklin. And then the bottom right-hand picture, the man on the left is David Coates, probably talking to Gordon Young. A feature of the art gallery was that it was built to a sufficiently high specification to be able to borrow works from anywhere. And this enabled our first major art exhibition on the works of Lucy Kemp Welsh to include items from national collections, including an enormous work, Colt Hunting in the Forest, borrowed from the Tate Gallery where it was languishing in the store. To our amusement, some years later, when we were again displaying the painting, the county asked the Tate Gallery if at the end of our exhibition it could be borrowed by them as part of a display at the castle at Winchester, and they were turned down because their gallery was not up to standard. The week before the 1999 opening, I was interviewed live on Radio Solent. And one of the questions I was asked was, what were the keys to us having achieved the feat of setting up the museum? My response was that we harnessed together a team of business people and a team of history and heritage professionals who, recognizing each other's skills, all worked in unity to make it happen. So that's how it all began. There is, of course, another story to be told about how 12 years later, I led a plot to dismantle everything to lead to what we now have, to ensure we keep ahead of the game in how a local museum can serve the local community. The project involved reducing the space for local history to accommodate the cafe, which led to some heated debate among the trustees. But the result, I think, is a more sustainable enterprise with St Barbe a busy destination in the town. An often used phrase over the years, we must all have heard it, is St Barbe punches above its weight, and long may it continue to do so. So there we are. I apologise if I have omitted someone that should have been mentioned. It is surprising how quickly our memories fade. And I'm now going to pass you over to Steve Marshall, the man who came to join us 27 years ago as an already wise head on young shoulders. Thank you.
Evening, everybody. I'm going to try and be brief, so just skate over a few things. As David said, I took over in 1997 from Sue Franklin. The museum, as it was then, opened in 1999, and there's a couple of shots here of what it looked like inside, so the timeline, and also the main museum displays themed around a walk around the district, starting at the coast, moving into the towns, and then out into the villages and the countryside. Once we got ourselves open, the thing that we needed to do was sort out all of our systems for collections, for volunteer management, for running the museum and all that side of things. But I think, as David has already alluded, that St Barbe's great success has always been based on its people. So I'm going to mention a few of those people this evening. Not all, and like David, I apologise for anyone that I miss, but just a few of the key people from those days. So there's a few here. On the left-hand side, you'll see Joanna Close Brooks. So when I started here, Joanna was looking after the collections, and I worked very closely with her on that side of things, and she was a great supporter and really drove that side of things, and it meant I didn't have to worry about it, which was great. So always a pleasure to work with Joanna. You can see her there leading a tour at Buckland Rings during one of Sarah Newman's events a few years later. In the middle photo there, you'll see Carol Hawkins, who's sitting just over there. Carol came to join us. When I started, I was the only paid member of staff, and it was envisaged that the museum would be largely run by volunteers. It became apparent that that wouldn't quite be possible. So Carol came on board as admin support and did a fantastic job. And St Barbe, being St Barbe, got pulled into all kinds of other things. You name it, and she ended up doing it. With Carol, you'll see there Sue Roper. Some of you will remember Sue, who came in to help Gordon running the shop and eventually ended up running the shop herself, and also used her artistic skills to help with a lot of the children's activities in the school holidays and things like that. So Carol and Sue were really key to what we were doing back in those days. We couldn't have done it without them. On the right there, you'll see someone who you might recognise, all dressed up there. That's Mark Tomlinson. So one of the things that was our priority after the museum opened was to try and engage with audiences, get people through the door. And we really wanted to get schools involved, we wanted to get families involved. And we got an Heritage Lottery Fund grant for 3 years to run that project. And we were very lucky that we got Mark to come in and run that for us. He did a fantastic job, really built up our schools and family audiences from scratch. The museum was always packed out in the school holidays. It was so successful that we managed to get the county council and the district council to step in and pay for it when the Heritage Lottery funding ran out. Sadly, things don't work like that anymore, but those were the days. Now, volunteers, we couldn't do any of this stuff, and it remains the case very much today, without our volunteers. There are so many volunteers that work with us still, and so many who have done over the years. There's a few here. Sheila Boone, up in the top left there, running a wash day school group session in the old museum displays, working for Mark there. We've got Gordon and his front of house staff, and we've got Ken and Alf, who I couldn't do a talk and not mention Ken and Alf, who were the key men in the exhibition installation team for many, many years, and also the museum handymen as well. If you needed anything making or fixing, then they did that for us. And for many, many years, they were stalwarts for the exhibition team. Now we have a team of 10 volunteers doing that work, and a very good team they are too. Richard is one of them, who's sitting just over there. Trustees. The trustees were, a real pleasure to work with. I always felt very, very supported when I worked here. And there you can see David on the left-hand side, who was the chairman. Basically, without him, none of us would be sitting here or standing here tonight talking about this, because he really made it happen, and he was the man that conjured up money from his magic money tree whenever we needed it. And absolutely, I mean, St Barbe wouldn't be here without him, so thank you very much to David. With David, you'll see Richard Hawkins in the middle there, and Roland Stott. Some of you will remember Roland. Roland was the treasurer for many, many years, and especially when I was the last few years of my time as director, and he was an absolute rock, fantastic man, a very good treasurer, and real pleasure, lovely man to work with as well. So the next priority really was to try and reach those communities outside of the museum. So the villages, people in New Milton, not just the people of Leamington and Pennington. So we got Heritage Lottery Fund money for a 5-year project, and Sarah Newman came in to deliver the programme for us and did so beyond our wildest expectations. We had an exhibition in an empty shop in New Milton, which you can see top right there. We had exhibitions in village halls, and Sarah ran all kinds of amazing events as well. The one in the bottom right there was a concrete day that she ran in honour of Sway Tower and the work that went on there. So Sarah's now running the Russell Coates, of course, so she's gone on to greater things. I thought I should mention a few exhibitions before I finish off, because we've done some really rather nice things over the years, and I've tried to pick out some that had a particular impact on a particular community or particular people. Here we see the first Sven Berlin exhibition that we did in 2003, which was very much focused on his time in the New Forest and also his relationship with the Gypsy community. So Sven Berlin's portraits turned the walls into kind of a family album for that group, and most of them had never ever entered a museum or art gallery before in their lives, but they were there having a cup of tea and sitting there surrounded by their family members. You can see there we've got Len Wells sitting by a portrait of his father, Benny. You can see the family resemblance. We've got Sheila Lee and her 2 daughters who came all the way from Liverpool to see the exhibition as well. So that was a really amazing, amazing show and had a big impact on some of the people that visited. I couldn't do this without mentioning Jill Clark. Jill first did an exhibition with us back in 2006 on Evelyn Dunbar and went on to curate exhibitions on the Women's Land Army. You can see there groups of surviving Women's Land Army members who came here for a couple of events. And also at the top there, you'll see Martina Humber, who was the mayor at the time, also chairman of the Friends, and Mary Fagan, the Lord Lieutenant. It was lovely to have those land girls come in after all those years and see the work that they had done in the Second World War celebrated in that way. Always a pleasure to work with Jill and still collaborating with her now, which is rather lovely. I know that this event was Mark Tomlinson's favourite thing that happened in the museum. We did an exhibition called Home Lad Home, all about the horses that served in the First World War. And it happened to coincide with War Horse being shown at the Mayflower Theatre in Southampton. And we managed to get Michael Morpurgo and Joey, the horse from War Horse, to come into the galleries and meet a group from Priestland School. And that was really quite amazing to see. It was so lifelike to see this puppet horse moving around the galleries like a real thing. You know, you wanted to go up and scratch his nose. It was quite phenomenal. And that was, a really memorable day. Another one, the Shorelines exhibition we did, I think, in 2015, joint curated again with Jill Clark. And off the back of that, Laura Bullivant, who was our learning officer seconded from what was Hampshire Museum Service in those days, ran a project with people with dementia, so encouraging them to come in and see the exhibition, work with a writer and then produce their own poems in response. And you can see them there with the writer looking at some of the pictures. And then there was a book that was actually published of their poetry based around their reminiscences of seaside memories, seaside holidays, that kind of thing. So there's just a real whistle-stop tour through a few of my highlights, if you like, people and events and things. Everything changed, I suppose. We despite the successes of our programs, we always felt like we were fighting against the building. It was so easy to walk past it and not even know it was there. And we felt that we needed to do something about that. So we looked into the possibility of another capital bid. We got permission from the HLF to submit a bid. And the rest is kind of history, if you like, because it's just there opposite in front of us there. It was decision time for me because by that time, it was becoming impossible to really run the museum and run the exhibitions programme. And to do that on top of running a major Heritage Lottery Fund capital bid, well, I just thought this is not going to be feasible. So the decision was, do I want to do the museum? Do I want to do the exhibitions? I chose the exhibitions. So I went freelance and working for other museums and galleries, but still, I'm very pleased to say, being allowed to tinker away at the exhibitions here as well. So Mark Tomlinson came back in, this time as director, did a fantastic job getting the exhibition up and running. You can see some of the artists' plans there on the left-hand side. And when the news that we'd got the bid came through, this is from a press cutting on the right with Mark, and you can see Joanna and Sue and Jackie and one or two other ne'er-do-wells there amongst the crowd. And of course, that resulted in the project that we're all familiar with today. You can see there on the left-hand side, the frontage being demolished, the interior, what David was saying about we felt like we'd only just put the museum in and we were ripping it all out again. And there's Mark with the Duke of Wessex on the opening day. And also Geoffrey Dashwood's Sparrowhawk being craned in onto the front porch there for the opening exhibition that was curated for us by Chris Packham. And David and Rafe Montague back for another reopening, cutting the ribbon on the official reopening day as well. So that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Jackie, and she's going to talk about our amazing collections.
Thank you. Me again. Some of you might not know what I do. There's an ugly rumour I'm paid, but they can't afford my rates, so I'm actually a volunteer and a trustee at the museum, and I'm a conservator, a collections manager, and I came to the museum in December 2003, started working in January 2004, and sort of think of me as kind of like the housekeeper for the collection. So if something needs storage, I will store it. If something needs, when all the collection work goes on the wall, I'm the person who does that. So that's why I'm talking to you about the collection, because it's been my collection for the last 20 years, which is a bit scary, really. When I came here, I was a bit nervous because I hadn't actually worked in conservation in the UK. And I had a chat with Steve, and the first background job that I got was doing locations and repacking collection, because I'm not quite sure they really knew what to do with me. I can remember saying when we had our first chat that I did understand they didn't have a conservation lab, and that I promised not to come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, because there is nothing worse than having a bright-eyed, bouncy volunteer when all you want is a cup of tea and to work out what's in your emails. And that was 20 years ago now. When I arrived, there were about 10,000 items in the collection by then, probably in 100 boxes. They could, but I could fit in and know exactly how the place was working, because it was run to the same sort of standards that I'd come across working in a national institution the other side of the world. Sorry, I haven't got the right glasses on. There are about 100 boxes in the store upstairs. So that is what is called Store F3, and it's basically not as big as the foyer outside, and everything was just stacked everywhere. And there was also a store out at Braxton that David referred to, and that was where the bodies were buried. So if it wasn't fragile and it wasn't small, it was out at Braxton. So nowadays, we've got 400 boxes, we've got probably 24,000 items plus, and thankfully we have improved our storage a lot. We had great standards from day one. The people who set this place up really knew what they were doing. It was set up as a registered museum, and then in about 2008, we gained the new accreditation standards from the Museums Association. So the big boys are accredited. Accredited means you really know what you're doing and you're running to the right standards. Something as bureaucratic as accreditation isn't something you think about, when you talk about museums. But governance rules are seriously strict. Policies cover what you can collect, your collection area, how you care for it, use it. And that's before you even get to the policies on finances, access. The list's endless. Hos Maria. It gets longer every time we have to redo it. And we continually, about every 3 years? Every 3 years, we go through it all again. And we're still doing well. We got the NPO last year. We are the smallest national portfolio organisation in the country. And that's like the next rung up the ladder. The Tate is an NPO. That's the sort of people that place runs on the same standards as. The collection care is governed by something called the Spectrum Standards, almost as wordy as the accreditation documents. Last time I looked, there were 72 blank pages to fill in on the form on the website. But it allows us, the collection care standards in Spectrum, they allow us to keep the collection in the best possible state for future generations, so we monitor and control the environment, how we store the material, how we handle the material, and importantly, what the collection is, the catalogue. We've got a clear process when anything comes into the building, who gave it to us, what the purpose for it is, because we collect things for different reasons, whether we're going to keep it or reject it, because we do say no to some things. We did have to say no to a pony cart recently because we just couldn't fit it anywhere, even though we'd have loved to have had it. All of this collection documentation is recorded on something wonderful called Modes. Modes is our cataloguing system, And it's a database that contains all of the above information, plus photographs of probably 75% of the items. And most importantly, what it tells you is where it is in the building. Because if you've got 24,000 items, you really need to know where they are. So this is the modes spreadsheet. You've got the number, and everything has the identifying number, and we are LMGLM, and that identifies us as Lymington, so that if someone nicks something and it turns up in a sale somewhere and they see LMGLM on it, they know it belongs to us. What it is, description, photograph, and then, really importantly, where it is in the building. Because, as you can imagine, with a lot of volunteers, a lot of users, a lot of exhibitions, things get moved around a lot. Poor Freya down there, who's our collections manager at the moment, we're always looking for things because something's been moved, and it's really important that this is kept up to date. And it is up to date. We are one of the few organisations in the country that probably does have a catalogue that's up to date. You know, all the fuss about the British Museum. They've got rather more objects than us, and it's really easy to get behind with your cataloguing. It's a fully searchable database. It records all of our collection, plus the library, plus the handling collection, plus all the information files. It's kept with the help of a number of willing volunteers, and over the years we've had some fantastic cataloguers. They photograph, they type entries. Joanna has done it for decades, bless her. We put the items away, we write the thank you letters, and it is up to date. And it takes a lot of work to do that, and I can't thank the people who do it for us enough. We wouldn't have this collection if it wasn't for the donors. There are over 40 people who have given more than 100 items, including the friends. We clock in at 688 items donated, and they're really assorted. They range from everything from a turf spade to one of William Gilpin's watercolours. The early donors, as has been said, they started amassing things well before there was a building. The very first item in the collection is this one. It's 1988.1. So that dates from, 7 years before we actually opened, and it's the last day that the Lyric Cinema was open in Lymington. And I know David was probably going to tell you the story, so I'll tell you really quickly. When they had the museum in the room, this lady used to come in, that was blown up on the wall, and this lady used to come in and look at it. And she came in a number of times, and somebody eventually went up and said, why? And she said, that's my husband, and it's the only photo I know of him in his police uniform. So that's the sort of thing that a social history museum can do for people. Some of the early donors, and again, apologies for not mentioning, the King family, it's been mentioned already. They've given us a lot of our treasures. This is actually an early photo of their shop, dressed up for a coronation. Hang on, sorry, stuck together. The Underwood family gave us an enormous archive of material from both wars. They corresponded, Gail Underwood corresponded with a lot of the soldiers, both here and abroad, and this is one of our great collection of the Indian soldiers from Barton-on-Sea. Gussie Payne gave us all his postcards, hundreds of them, and he'd also, over the years, drawn little postcards himself of what he remembered the places to look like. We had all the Ian Hodge photographs of Lymington. So this is where the one-way system is now, what was Soapy Lane. That's the Wellworthy collection. That came in very early on. That's the old Wellworthy factory, long before it was modernised. The Kelly family donated a lot of maps from an architect, H.G. Burley, including some really, really large-scale maps that are probably the most heavily used items in the collection. People love them. They tell them where all the cesspits are and the drains and things when they're renovating their houses on the high street. We've talked about the Klitz family. That's their shop as well. They gave us some amazing material. And just recently, we were donated a set of choir books from the St. Thomas's Church. They found them when they were renovating the organ loft. They date from the late 1800s. And we were able to date them for them because we've got a letter from Philip Klitz with his reference to be the organist at the church at the time. So we could, and his name appeared on some of the music scores. And then there's the Leamington Historical Society. They kindly gave us the bulk of their collection at the same time. And also the Town Council, they gave us their historical material too. In subsequent years, that's been followed by the collections from noted local historians Jude James and Arthur Lloyd. We've had family archive material from the Duplessis, the Marsh, the Brands, the Russell family. So that's Joanna. And Jude. And these ones are. So these are from the Marsh family. So, right, okay, hang on, go back. Okay. So the social history collections. Okay, that's what, yes, right. So these are from Malcolm Bailey and Audrey Corbin. So they're from social history collections from other parts of our collecting area. Latterly, we've had some amazing material from Robert Gilmore, who was the son of Alan Seeby, and you've all seen our wonderful Seeby prints. But we also got a load of lovely photos because they used to come down here and camp. So we've got these wonderful photos of them camping in the forest. For around 2005, as you've been told, we were lucky enough to have a lotteries grant that allowed us to do another 5-year programme branching out into the villages. And that's where Sarah Newman came on board as curator, and Leanne Warner, who did great work with collections management. It was the first time we'd had somebody who knew what they were doing, who was employed to actually deal with the collections, care, loans and things like that. So it took a huge amount of pressure off people. As Steve mentioned, you know, the Great Estates exhibition with the weekend workshop on concrete, and also the other one was the food exhibition where we took over Buckland Rings and had an Iron Age food weekend. So this was one of the demonstrators cooking Iron Age food. It was a brilliant series of activities, generated huge interest in the history of the area, and it did wonders for our collection. The collection just grew exponentially during that time. And I should point out that over 90% of our collection comes as donations. We don't have money full stop, but we certainly don't have money to buy things. So, you know, things like the Celtic and the Boulder Hordes. That's a different one, that's not mine. We've had to raise the money to buy them. The collection now numbers in excess of 24,000, plus all the research files and everything else, and our handling material. Space is really tight. If you have a nice building that you would like to donate to us, we would love to hear from you. In 2016, we moved the entire collection to Efford for the Lottery Fund refit, which was a bit of a challenge. This is that's me with shorter hair, packing things. It was actually quite nice because my main job in Perth was I completely moved and refitted the collection stores, and that was a good probably 10 years before this, and it was nice to remember that I could still actually do it, but this was a slightly smaller scale. But again, we had so many volunteers that helped, and it was a fantastic project. Thanks to that, we now have a dedicated research. We finally have the King Research Room, and it's wonderful. I have a work table. I don't have to, all the work we used to do was done on the staff tea room table upstairs. So you imagine some of those exhibitions that were put together, they were put together on the staff tea room table upstairs. Since reopening, we've also been able to upload our version of modes onto our collection database, onto onto our website, so you can now search for your favourite items from the sofa at home. Our last major collection project was thanks to a grant from Lymington and Pennington Town Council, where we finally got to rebuild Braxton. So Braxton is now an up-to-standard store. This year's our 25th birthday, and our ambitious Lymington Afloat exhibition and festival is this year, and we hope that will boost the collection. Well, we know it will boost the collection. Time marches on. Remember that the 1970s were 50 years ago, and it's from that era that we need to be collecting now, because you hate to say it, but those people are going. They're going rapidly, and people don't think of a museum collecting things like that. They think of the Victorian era. But if you've got that kind of material, you've seen the sort of social history we have, we need that collecting material. We don't have to keep it. We can take a digital scan now, because thankfully that kind of technology has advanced to the level that it's quite an acceptable storage medium. We're always looking for social history images. We love family history. We're really happy with digital. So please, next time you're sorting out someone's stuff, don't bin Gran's pics of the flower show. We'd love to have them. So anyway, here's to the next 25 years. Hopefully someone can find us another store, because we are now a recognised centre of excellence, and people keep trying to give us stuff, big stuff, and we really need the space. So I will leave you with the first logged item for 2024, a phone box on the high street in the 50s. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Well, we're already running a bit late, so you're going to have to pretend that I'm Prue. So you're going to have to pretend that I'm a lot smarter, a lot neater, and I don't sound like I come from Romford. So do what you can with that, and I'm going to march through. I need my glasses. What Prue has written, because it seems rude not to say what she wanted to say. So Prue is the chair of the Friends organisation, and she does an absolutely spectacularly marvellous job at it. So, and this is what she's written about it. So the inaugural meeting of the Friends of Lymington Museum took place on the 1st of June in 1988 as an initiative from Robert Barrett, here with us now. There was a warm reception for the idea of a museum in Lymington, as you've heard before. The first meeting was chaired by Jude James, who remained committed to St Barbe right until his death, and has given us all of his collection, basically all of his research, which we now have in the museum, which is wonderful. Notable people who were there and are still members today, including Joanna, who's getting a good shout out in this in this talk, and Janet from the King family. So I was going to... So here are two scary-looking people. So there's Sheila and Helen, who were both involved very early on. In the accounts for 1990, the Friends had raised £900, of which 350 were subscriptions to the Friends, and the subs were £3 and £5, and they're still not very, very much, so I would encourage people to remain as Friends of the Museum. Funds were raised by various means. Frida Angelou had a regular market school selling bric-a-brac. There was a garden reception that was at Moore Blatch Solicitors, precursor to our current fundraiser, Open Gardens. And there's a plug for Open Gardens. I know you've already heard about it, but it's on the 26th of May this year, and it's going to be fantastic. Buy your tickets soon. And here is a picture of, I think this was when it was Moore Blatch rather than Moore Barlow, as it is now, from the Open Gardens. And here is a plant stall. Again, we will have plant stalls again in a couple of weeks. In the 1991 report by Hampshire County Council approving the setting up of the Museum for Lymington, it was noted how much focused community support there was for the project. And the formal start of the Friends was in 1992. And the Friends have continued to thrive and provide essential support for St Barbe, both financial and with the long hours and lots of voluntary support. In 1989, Ted Marsh took over as chair, as we'd heard before, and joined by Jude James, Bill Klitz, Gordon Young, Martina Humber, John Ward and Prue Baker. And here, I think, is Prue and John Trafford, a private view, which was one of the Friends' private views. And in 2006, the records show that there were 325 members, but numbers were declining, and so in 2009 it was decided to restructure the relationship with the museum. And an annual museum pass was merged with the Friends of St Barbe to form an offering that we have today. And today I would like to say that we have got more than 900 members. So that's more than 900 people who pay for membership, but some of those are family memberships. So we've kind of got well over 1,500. I've worked in very big museums that haven't got that number of friends. So I think that shows the quality of the commitment that there is from the local people in Lymington, and it's really important to us. So here is a tea stall. I think this is from an Open Gardens. It is. Yeah. It is, yes. Plus whatever. So we have all sorts of things that we do. We have free entry to the museum, talks, receptions, biannual Open Gardens, and then Prue has put plus whatever bright ideas we have or come up with, or to be honest, whatever bright ideas anyone else comes up with as well. For example, this year, 2 of our members are putting on a small exhibition to celebrate the environmental initiatives that are taking place at the museum. So there'll be a small display in the window. The function of the Friends in the 1990s were defined as fundraising, sourcing collections and providing the hanging team, which is our favourite term in the museum. We now have 10 people on the hanging team who do a wonderful job helping Steve put all the exhibitions up. The latter two have reverted over time to the museum, but the major function still remains fundraising to support the museum. Today, our fundraising is through our record number of memberships of both Friends of all the different categories and patrons, and our events. In addition to the normal programme of talks, you will remember the online art auction that we did during COVID, which raised quite a lot of money. Quizzes, Queen Quizmaster over here, Jackie, and all sorts of other events. But the Open Gardens is a big one for us, and we normally raise about £8,000. So it's absolutely, definitely worth doing, and it's wonderful to have everybody's support. It's hard but satisfying work, says Prue. In the financial year just finished, the Friends have raised £31,000 to provide essential support for the staff and activities of the museum. And I think this is to evoke our Christmas events that we have, mulled wine and mince pies. There's the Friends and Patrons events leaflet, which I think we have outside. We've got a wonderful group of friends who are doing all the lovely planting that we've got around the museum at the moment. I've got a label here which says Jolly Gardeners. And this is all of the Friends invited to a private view and enjoying those events. So, to finish, I must ask you to give a very big thank you to the Friends Committee, who between them administer the membership scheme, create and run events, including the magnificent Open Gardens, and all sorts of unseen but necessary tasks that keep it all running smoothly. So thank you very much on behalf of the Friends and Prue. Dave. Aha. So, now it's me. And it's really hard, I think, after having such really interesting talks and discussing how the museum came about and all of the wonderful and exciting things that have happened. And then in 2018, they got me. So I'm not sure what to say about that. I've been here for about 5.5 years. I've had an absolutely wonderful time since I've been here. And what I would say is that I think that the founding of the museum and all of the various refurbishment projects ending up with the one that you see across the road have been a complete triumph. And there's a lot of people in this room who are responsible for that. And what I realise, I think, because I'd worked on a lot of refurbishment projects before I came to St Barbe, is that with this kind of National Lottery Heritage Fund project, there are all sorts of compromises, promises, agreements are made, quite often with fingers crossed behind your back, about how much money things like the cafe will make and the shop will make, how much you'll get in corporate entertainment, and all those sorts of things, and also just how many people will flood through the doors. There's always a tendency to be very optimistic about those sorts of things. And also, that is what tends to happen for the first few months. But after that, kind of reality kicks in, and then you realise that actually you've got a building, you've got jobs, you've got an amazing collection and wonderful exhibitions, and it all has to be kind of kept going. And that's when the different type of hard work starts, I would say. But I think when I got here in 2018, what I found was an absolutely wonderful organisation and fantastic buildings to work in. So the staff are wonderful, without exception. The volunteers are astonishing, and I think I've sort of been saying that to them since the day I got there, because I've worked with a lot of volunteers in the past, and it normally makes my heart sink. But it didn't make my heart sink coming here. The volunteers are incredible. If they say they're going to come 2 hours every Tuesday morning for the rest of their lives, that's what they do. It's brilliant. The exhibitions, it goes without saying, are amazing. Everything in the museum is informative and well displayed. It's a fantastic and accessible building. And I think what Jackie was saying earlier, I really can't emphasise enough. I've worked at 3 of the most important museums in this country. I've been working in museums for 40 years this year. Coming to this museum is like going to any other museum in the country. It was set up properly, it knows what it's doing, and it works like any other museum in the country. And I think that's really impressive, because quite often I will visit smaller museums and sort of think, oh, that's a bit worrying, they're not doing that properly. So I think it's really important that everybody knows just how well the museum was set up in the first place. But I think our job, and when John started around about the same time as me as Chair of Trustees, we kind of knew that what we had to do was attract more consistent funding. And to do that, I think we knew that we had to do much more out in the community. And we'd had, as you've seen, several community projects before that were really successful, but there was never that funding to kind of keep them going and build the momentum. And I think we realised that we would need to do that. So I think what is on this slide here is sort of what I wanted to do, is to turn St Barbe into a kind of proper centre for the community, but for the whole community, not just for the people who can afford to become members and enjoy that kind of relationship. We wanted it to be much more about the whole community of Lymington and Pennington. And with a little help and hindrance, I'm not quite sure which way around it is, from COVID, we kind of got there in a funny sort of way, because we applied for money during the COVID period, which we got, and we applied for money for other projects as well, and we started to realise that we could actually start doing some of this work. So this is what we tell the council, and this is what is true. So this is a slide that when we apply for money for for New Forest District Council, this is what they want from us, and this is what we provide, which is benefiting the people of the New Forest, contributing to a vibrant community, and preserving the heritage of the New Forest and its coast. And it's really important that we do that. We do a lot of activities and events. We are now the kind of vibrant community hub that I think we always wanted to be. We have a lot of things going on. We've got a neurodivergent art group. We do tea and memories. We've got a fantastic young curators group. We have just won an award for the Hampshire Activities and Food programme that we run, which is run by Jo, who's sitting over there trying to look all quiet, but it's been a fantastic project. We've got a regular under-5s group, do lots and lots of work with schools, including Verity standing on a very cold beach at Barton quite frequently with a lot of 5-year-olds. I don't know how she does it. We have lots of children and family holiday activities linked to the museum and exhibitions, and we've done a huge amount of work with our Ukrainian guests in the past 2 years, work that I'm sure we all would have preferred not to be doing. But it has culminated in a really lovely exhibition which is over the road at the moment. So just as a little bit of detail, the Art First group, which is the neurodivergent art group, this basically enables a variety of people who all have artistic skills and talents to come to the museum and to be able to develop their practice. So they're not taught as such, but we facilitate whatever work they want to do. And on this Wednesday, when the group were in, they were all learning to make egg tempura and to learn how to paint in that way. Everybody was completely covered in blue paint when I went into the space. And in 2 weeks' time, they'll be using oil pastels and learning how to work with different types of material. It's a fantastic group, and one of the group now has got a piece of work in the open exhibition, which is fabulous. I will get there. So yes, and these are some of the other things that we do that you might sort of see around the town. So we've got pop-up activities that we've been doing in some of the villages locally. So we'll do handling sessions, kids' activities during the holidays and half term. We do some Barbe at Large on the Emsworth, we'll work out where we are, Emsworth Community Ground, Recreation Ground. We do that during the summer. We do, I can't read this, digital creative engagement. We've got online exhibitions. We have the open exhibition, which is obviously for everybody in the local community. And we've just started, again with Jo, doing the Saturday Morning Club, which is also very busy and very popular. Our young curators are spectacular. They're amazing. I was saying to somebody here earlier that once we get our hands on people, we kind of don't like to let them go. And I think that is part of what we should be doing, really. And we've got one of our initial young curators is going off to university this year. And we're hoping that he will come back and start talking to other young curators once he's been to university. And we started off with young curators, I think probably all coming from some of the bigger private schools locally. And now, because of the HAF programme, we've got children coming from all sorts of backgrounds. We've got lots of autistic children who participate in HAF, and we really are there to sort of help and encourage them in every possible way that we can. In November 2022, somebody mentioned that we received National Portfolio Organisation status, and this allows us to work in a sort of much broader way, trying to work with people from lots of different villages in the New Forest, and also to work on some groundbreaking exhibitions such as the Parallel Lives that we had last year. And this year we'll be doing the Lymington Afloat exhibition, which got a mention a bit earlier. And this funding enables us to develop our audiences, working with young people, and really providing proper engagement for people throughout the forest. So we've got a fantastic disability access group, because the museum itself is amazingly accessible, and so we try to make it accessible in as many ways as we possibly can. As I say, we've got the young curators, and also we're supporting apprenticeships now. We have an apprentice here, Daisy, wave over in the background. So the one that we got here, this is Kirsty, who was our first apprentice, who was amazing, and now we've got Daisy, who is also amazing. And we want to support those apprenticeships, but we're also supporting it as part of the Lymington Afloat, because Lymington Afloat won't be just an exhibition, it's also going to be a whole education programme and a festival as well. And the education programme is really important, and so we will be working with schools and colleges, universities, to really sort of develop a lasting relationship and hope to get more people apprenticing into some of the marine businesses locally, and maybe also taking on more apprentices at the museum. So St Barbe, I think, probably has changed its focus a bit over the last 25 years or so, but I'm really proud of the fact that we have kept the essence of St Barbe. We've got the amazing museum exhibition, which we tinker with and change a bit every year or so. We've got a spectacular temporary exhibitions programme that is just getting better and better and better. The exhibitions are truly world class. It's amazing to be able to bring works from national collections down to Lymington and remind people, particularly maybe not the people in this room, but the people who don't know the museum so well, but those objects that are in the British Museum and the National Gallery and the Victoria and Albert Museum, they belong to all of us. And it's really important that those objects are seen here and that we bring them here for exhibitions, because I think probably most of the people in this room can maybe afford to go to an exhibition at the V&A, but not everybody can. And so it's important that we bring that material here. So we're working much more closely with local businesses, with schools, with colleges, with universities, care homes, partner organisations like Folio and Culture in Common, and the community centre and the food bank and the social prescribers, and we really try to get our finger into every single pie locally. So I feel like we're going from strength to strength, and probably going to go a little bit against what David said at the beginning, because I think I'm looking forward to another 125 years or so. So, thank you very much, everybody.
Has anybody got any questions, or are you all stunned? Anybody got any questions? Well, you know where to find us anyway, don't you? I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'd just like to share a little bit of good news with you to finish off. Maria mentioned that we've won an award for our HAF scheme. What she didn't say is we're also shortlisted for the National Prize. So that's all credit to you guys. And well done, St Barbe. Thank you very much for coming.